I don't deserve that medal. The following story was told in the House of Representatives on December 21st by the Honorable Walter H. Judd of Minnesota, who spent 10 years as a missionary in China. Mr. Judd found the experience in the November 1945 fellowship, a letter written by a teenage soldier to a friend in his home church. First of all, here is the story as it was printed in the Congressional Record. You asked about my medal. I haven't told the story of it to anyone, and you will see why when you hear about it. I'm not very proud of it, and yet there isn't a thing I can do about it now without revealing a story that would get my new friends into trouble. You may tell the story so long as my name is never attached to it. It is now 2 a.m. Tomorrow I go off to the battlefield. I may never get home again, and I want someone to know that I don't deserve that medal. I didn't earn it. It happened this way. I was captured by the Japanese with 5 of my pals. We were marched along through the jungle with bayonets in our backs. As we marched toward the Japanese camp, I had to see my comrades one by one killed, mutilated, torn limb from limb. As I watched them fall, I knew that within a few minutes I, too, would be killed as they had been. But somehow, at that moment, my only thought was the sooner the better. Life for me was over. I said the 23rd Psalm. I said the Lord's Prayer, and then I started to think things over. A good bit of the Yankee spirit stayed with me. Die I must, but I determined not to let my capture see my fear. Trembling from head to foot, marching in mud up to my ankles, with a bayonet sticking in my back, I began to whistle the way I used to when I was a small boy and had to go through a dark street. So I whistled as loud as my trembling lips would let me. After a while, to my surprise, I realized that I was whistling. We gathered together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to his name. He forgets not his own. Suddenly, from my reverie, I became aware that someone had joined me in my whistling. No, it couldn't be. But it was my Japanese captor. He too was whistling the hymn. Soon we both broke into words, he in Japanese, I in English. The wicked oppressing now ceased from distressing. He forgets not his own. Gradually the power of the hymn made me relax and must have had the same effect on him, for soon I felt his gun fall from its place. And still later he caught up with me and we sang, he in Japanese and I in English. I was interrupted in my thinking by his words in perfect English. I never ceased to wonder at the magnificence of Christian hymns. Startled by his English, I jumped and we both laughed. Soon we were talking. I asked where he had learned to speak English, and he replied that he had gone to Christian mission schools. Not Glory Kindergarten? I asked. Why, I started in Glory Kindergarten, he replied. How do you know it? Then I told him how in Sunday school we had studied about the congregational schools and churches. We had raised money for Glory Kindergarten and had sent over gifts for them. Then followed the conversation that is impossible to relate, one that few men have ever had with one another when surface things are swept away and the soul stands out on top. We talked of war and how the Japanese Christians hate it, of Christianity and its power in the world, of what it would mean if people would ever really dare to live it, of the incomparable value of the missionaries, of Kagawa, of our own ideals for our homes, our jobs, and our future families. And finally, at his suggestion, we knelt in the mud and prayed for suffering humanity around the world, for his peace that passeth all understanding, and for peace again on earth, with good will toward man. When we arose, he asked if I would take him back as a prisoner to the American headquarters. He said that this was the only way he could live up to his Christianity and thus help Japan to become a Christian nation. And on the way back, he found in various foxholes other Japanese Christians, and they too joined me as we walked toward the American headquarters. I shall never forget the hope and joy that came into their eyes as my Japanese friend unfolded to them, one by one, as he met them, how he found each other and why and where they were being taken. All the way back we talked of the Christian religion. When we neared camp by mutual agreement, they put on poker faces and somber looks, and I, gun in hand, marched them into camp. After the war is over, they will spend their lives keeping alive and spreading an ever growing Christian community in Japan. So you see, I don't deserve a medal for the most wonderful experience of my life. You surely see now why I don't want to talk about my medal. As you can see, the story was made up of an actual letter written by this young soldier. The letter was, of course, written in the first person. Therefore, no one but the GI himself could tell this story as it was printed. But if you made a mental picture of the experience as you read the first person version, then told what you saw, you could tell the story as follows. During April and May and until June 21st, 1945, when it was officially announced that the Battle of Okinawa was won, there was terrible fighting on that little island. 11,260 American soldiers were killed and 32,308 were wounded and hundreds were taken prisoners. One day, as some American troops stormed ashore, 5 of our soldiers were taken prisoners. 5 Japanese guards, each with a bayonet pointed between a prisoner's shoulder blades, marched our men back along a narrow muddy trail toward the prisoner of war camp behind the Japanese lines. Now it is a hard thing to march along with your hands up when the mud is splashing and the mosquitoes are biting. The fifth soldier in line saw his 4 companions shot through on the least pretext and their bodies cast to the side of the trail. He knew that he too was doomed and must die, for sooner or later he would forget and lower his hand to scratch a mosquito bite or rub away a splatter of mud. So he said the Lord's Prayer and repeated the 23rd Psalm. And then, trying to be brave and to keep from trembling, he began to whistle and found himself whistling an old hymn tune that he had learned in Sunday school. He had hardly whistled a stanza when, to his surprise, he realized that someone else was whistling with him. It couldn't be the guard, he thought to himself, but there is no one else around. It must be. It was his Japanese guard whistling with him. After whistling one stanza together, they began to sing the American soldier in English and the Japanese guard in Japanese. We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to his name, he forgets not his own. And as they sang, they both relaxed. The American soldier was conscious that the bayonet no longer was pricking his back. There was a quick step. The Japanese guard was beside him. Their eyes met and they grinned. What a power and a majesty there is in the old Christian hymns, said the guard in perfect English. Startled almost beyond words, the GI said, Where did you learn English? Why, I have had all my education in Christian mission schools in Japan, replied the guard. Did you ever hear of the Glory Kindergarten? Asked the soldier. The Glory Kindergarten? Why, that's the first school I ever attended when I was a little lad. And when I was a little lad, I can remember going to Sunday school and raising money to send supplies to the Glory Kindergarten in Japan, mused the American. And now, just think, the little boy who gave his nickels is held prisoner by the little boy who learned to know Jesus in the Glory Kindergarten. Then they talked as only men can talk when the barriers are all taken away and the doors are open wide. They talked of home and loved ones. They talked of the future, and the Japanese Christian boy told him how the Christians in Japan hated this war and how they wanted Christ and the missionaries to come back to Japan again. Then the Japanese boy suggested that they pray together, and down on their knees on that muddy trail they prayed. They prayed for peace to come to the warring nations, and that Christ would come back again, and that his peace would fill every heart. And when they rose, the Japanese boy placed his gun in the American soldier's hands and said, I've thought it all through. I want Christ to come back again to Japan, and if ever he does, America must open the door. So now you take me prisoner and take me back to the American prisoner of war camp, and I've got a body in a foxhole here, and another there, and another over there. I think they would like to come too. And in a few minutes there were several, and they all went back toward the American lines. Just outside the camp, they got their heads together and decided that for the good of all concerned, they would not say anything about it. So the Japanese boys put on their poker faces, and the American soldier marched them into camp at the point of the bayonet. And they gave him a medal for all that. And can you not easily understand why he said, I didn't earn that medal?